Okay, let's see if we can get a elevator built that uses a floor that when we tap the E key brings us up. If we tap the Q key, it brings us down. And the doors will be a separate tutorial here. If we look at what this elevator is doing, this is all of the code. Again, this image will be provided for you guys to be able to use. We also see that the actual construction of this is a cylinder, although this would be your ground elevator static mesh or whatever is it that you want to call that. And you would also have a box collision that would be parented to your mesh. So let's make a new one of these things. So I've got an elevator here. I'm going to make another one. So I'm going to go to blueprint class, and we are going to make an actor. And what we'll call this thing is, let's call it elevator 2. And now, double click on this. I need to be able to add geometry or add something to this that's going to allow for that to be the thing that's going to lift the character up and down. So what we can add here is a static mesh. And if we look at over here on the side, now this can be just your elevator model that you've made, that's fine. But if we look over on the side here, your static mesh, I'm just going to add a cylinder. And you can see cube, a chamfer, not that. Let's see, static mesh. Just trying to make it look a little bit different than the other one. I'm just gonna use a cube this time. I'm gonna squish this thing down. I don't want it to be that big. I also want my snapping for the grid, maybe 1. Oops, not grid. I want to do that for my scale. So 0.25. Let's go really small. Even that's a little bit too fast. Let's see. And maybe something like that. Alright. We can also turn off snapping to get a little bit more precise. Okay. Now that I have that, I need to add a static. Or not a static. I need to add a box collision. So type in box. There's box collision. There we go. And I want it to be so when I'm walking onto that plate, maybe in the middle of that, that'll start to activate. This makes sense for where it is in relationship to the sides. Let's move it to about here as well. And I also want to make sure that this is attached to this one. So if I middle mouse button drag, or actually left mouse button drag that, there we go, you have that attached. Okay, now here comes the fun. I'm going to delete all of this stuff in my event graph. I'm going to right click and then add on component. Let's see. Okay, so I don't want to right click and search for that here. I want to have the box selected, and with that box selected, I'm going to go to on component, begin overlap. I also need to add another one of these, which is on component end overlap, meaning that if I'm on this thing, do the thing I want you to do, and if I'm not, you're not going to do what I want this to do. From here, we're going to drag out and then do a cast to first person. And so we want to put that to cast a first person character. We also want to link in the other actor to object. Right click and do that again. Cast to first person character. And then link this to that. And then also other actor will link to object. Okay. From here, drag out and put in enable input. Okay. We are going to also do that to here to disable input. Okay. Right click and put in get player controller. Okay. From there, we're going to link player controller to the return value and return value to the player controller. And we have the first little bit of this constructed. Over here, let's right click and then put timeline. So we're going to add a timeline. We're going to put keyboard, and let's type in E. So keyboard E, make that happen. And we're going to link pressed with play. It's right there. Right click again and then type in keyboard Q. Got that one right here. We're going to link pressed to reverse. So when I do this action that I'm going to make here and it's pressing E, it's going to play it. If I press Q, it's going to reverse the action that I have. Okay, from here, we need to add, we're going to drag out and put set relative location. So set relative location, and that should be fine. And then from there, we're going to drag this out to a lerp vector. What does that mean? I don't know. It means that. Okay. All right. From this, I need to actually make a new variable, and this is going to be the set point and the end point. Again, do you need to know all this stuff and what it does? If you want to be a coder, I don't. You shouldn't want that either if you're spending this much time in a visual communications degree either. Okay, so I made a new variable. This variable needs to be called start Okay, so I thought I had that paused. I did not. What we're going to need to do, here's my cheat sheet for my original one. We need to add, so again, if we were inside our event graph, double click here. We're going to add a float track. And what a float track is going to do is say basically it's going to start from 0 and then move up to 1 basically. So we're going to say how long should this take for this action to happen? Let's say 3 seconds. You want it to be longer for that elevator ride? Change that. I'm going to add a point. So I'm going to add, let's see what happened in my 3D printer. Hold on. Okay, so we're going to make a key here. Put in time 0, value is 0, hit enter. Now, let's zoom out. At frame 3, let's right click, add a key. And we'll just change that and make sure it just says 3, value is 1. Okay, so just doing this. You can see that same thing's happening right in my demo one. That's good. Now, we're gonna hit compile. I'm gonna go into here. This looks pretty good. I'm sure I screwed something up. Yep, I need to add my new track, which I just made. I have to connect that to the alpha. Okay. That's looking good. That's looking good. All right, let's see what I did. Did I actually do something right? Let's see. first thing I need to do, I've got my elevator. I need to bring this into my scene. So I put this in my scene, drag this over here, and let's scale it up a little bit so I can actually see it. I'm going to move this up just a hair so that way it's a little bit more visible. All right, let's hit play. Let's go over here. Now, if I'm standing on this and I tap the E key, I actually did it. Not that I ever questioned my coding prowess, but that worked out well. Okay, so you walk over this, you tap the E key. There it goes. Q key, go down. Now, this is very small. Let's scale that up so it's a little bit easier. And again, I talked about in video games how things are a lot smaller or larger because it allows for the player to be able to navigate more. It's also because, you know, controls are clumsy. They're not like in the real world where we have 10 digits on our hands and we have feet that have toes and all those little different things we've evolved to be able to use. In the real world, we don't really have that. With VR, we have a little bit more control where we can actually grab things and have more control with individual limbs, but we still don't have, you can't play a piano yet in VR, you know, by using your fingers on a digital piano. You know, we're not really at that point. So exaggerating size to make sure that controls work is a good idea. And as you can see by scaling this up, that hitbox became bigger to use. Okay, so that was how to make an elevator, and it wasn't hopefully that scary. The big thing you need to realize is that your code has to be immaculate. It has to follow exactly what this is. If it doesn't do this, it's not going to work. And again, this last part right here, if 120 wasn't what you wanted it to be, maybe it was 900. Let's hit compile again. Let's hit play again. I'll go over to this elevator and I'll hit the E key. I'm going up 900 in 3 seconds. So obviously that's going to be very, very fast. I also feel that my hitbox is too small on this. So if I go back inside of here and I go into my viewport, let's just scale that hitbox so it takes up more of my box. So compile, minimize, hit play, go over here, tap the E key. So much easier. There we go. So this is how we can actually get a setup like this working. And as you can see, I can tap between these things. It's working, and that is it. I'm going to share the image from this video. Actually, let's do it this way. I'm just going to go in, double click, and do this. So you guys can see this setup right here. So this is what we want. On component begin overlap. On component end overlap. Cast to first person character. Enable input. Get player controller. Cast to first person character. Disable input. E. So type in keyboard E and that will show up. Timeline. Q. When you search for timeline, usually it says add timeline. If you type in timeline, it should show up as well. Start point won't show up for searching. You have to actually generate that by going over to here under variables, press variable. When you do that, remember that has to be changed to a vector variable. The endpoint variable is what defines how high you're going to go in the air. And remember, the only way you're going to get those values to show up is you have to hit compile. You have a lerp vector that's connecting start point to A and end point to B. Your track that we made, this track right here, defines how many seconds that this is going to take. So that's 3 seconds for this to go from 0 to 1. Or in our case right now, we're going from 0 height to 900 as the input was for endpoint that we did. Now, if we want that to be faster, that could be 0 to half of a second, or for 5 seconds. That's all defined inside of this part here. Just take this, 1 is going to be the end, so that's when you get to your max value. Change the time and make sure you again compile. We have elevator floor, which is the mesh that I'm using, and then we have our target or set relative location. That is it for making this. And again, if you have questions, please email me and I'll make sure that you have an answer.